So I guess it's my turn to talk about the current Abrams situation, and better late than never, huh? This is going to be a long one. But welcome back to another Talking Head video, but in this one, I'm going to give you my honest take on the current state of the Abrams, and even more so for US top tier, but more specifically, the M1A2 SEP V2. But please keep in mind, most of what I'm going to talk about is based solely off my own experiences in the game. And seeing that I have nearly 5,000 combined games in all of the Abrams variants, I think I'm fairly well suited to give a pretty accurate view for when it comes to how the vehicles perform in their respective BRs. But to add, I won't go too far into detail about the real world specs of the Abrams. However, there is a little bit I'd like to bring up for when it comes to the stated, and I'm saying this with air quotes, non-historical armor attributes. So with that being said, let's begin. Now, if you weren't already aware, USA Top Tier has seen its lowest win rate in recent memory, so much so that even I like to half joke by saying that if you play a Top Tier, just hope you're not paired with the Americans, as it will likely result in a complete loss. But when fighting against them, you have a very good possibility of winning that game. It's kind of sad if you think about it. Now, you're probably wondering why I didn't cover this near the beginning of the update. In truth, I was hoping Gaijin would do something about it so that I wouldn't have to say anything or have the need to do anything, and they did. Maybe not in the best possible ways, but ideally something is often better than nothing, and that's just me being optimistic. Albeit a good armor buff might be ideal, but I'm going to explain a little later in this video as to why such an armor buff might not benefit the Abrams nearly as much as everyone would otherwise hope for. But let's talk about the overall experience of the Abrams. It's not a terrible tank. It has fantastic mobility that is on par with nearly every other MBT in its class. It's responsive, the sights are amazing. Now, given the Gen 2 gunner sights, it made the Abrams far better than its previous counterparts, the original M1A2 and everything else before that. And the firepower, that is where the vehicle really shines. The M829A2 is a solid dart, as is the A1 version you'll find with the HC, the clickbait, etc. And let's be real, once you break over 550 millimeters of the base penetration threshold, anything above that is just a bonus. Let me explain. Even with DM53, you still have to aim in the general areas of, say, a T80 BVM, the lower plate, the upper front plate, the sides, etc. And though the general weak areas of said vehicles are made a bit more prominent with DM53, DM43, KEW, and M829 and 2 all require you to hit the same exact area, just a little bit more accurately to achieve similar results. To put things simply, you always should aim for the general areas with most Sabo types that you'll find at top tier. And there's a lot more to it, such as the weight of the darts, velocity, etc. And I'm not the right person to explain that in detail. And really, the only reason why anyone would want the upgraded M829A3 for the Abrams is for its anti-ERA tip. Did you know that the DM53 round also has it in the real world, but not in the game? I think if anyone would have noticed, it would have been me. But still, don't quote me on that. So that means Gaijin would likely not add it for the M829A3. And for what? A tiny amount of extra penetration? Putting it on par with, say, DM53? In truth, not a whole lot would change, or so I would believe. But let's talk about the buffs to the Abrams, as well as talking about the new SEP V2. That 5-second aced crew reload speed is, it's absolutely brilliant. I love it. It's made my own Abrams gameplay just that much better, as I can now rely on my reload to outpace nearly every other MBT at its tier. Minus the Type 10, you just, come on, let's be real. You can't out-reload that beast. Although I think that buff was very much needed, at least in my opinion. Look at it as a small step forward that goes a long way for all of the Abrams, but when it comes to the SEP V2, I have a whole video on that if you're interested in wanting to know more in a detailed overview of said vehicle, but to summarize, I actually think it's a worse off Abrams compared to the original SEP. The Tusk is nearly meaningless, and even more so now that Rank A MBTs now have stock darts, and they're not bad either. And to add, the top-mounted MG is just nothing more but a shot trap for frag rounds, though it's nice to have a solid backup to the SEP or vice versa with everything you've come to love and possibly even hate about the Abrams. That's it for when it comes to the slight positives of the Abrams. I did my best to keep it as positive as I could. The rest is, well, not great. So let's talk about the downsides of the Abrams, and it is it's quite the list. First and foremost is that neck. And this is where I want to talk about the armor. And even with said armor buff, it would barely benefit the Abrams. And hear me out here, all right? Let's say Gaijin does give it its mostly classified armor values with DU. And I'm not quoting anyone, all right? Not Red Effect, not other creators. And say they buff the lower front plate an extra 1 to 200 millimeters of effective thickness against kinetic. That would solve the lower plate issue at near point blank ranges, but players, much like myself, are usually not aiming for the lower hull of the Abrams. It really depends on the situation, but most of the time I'm going for that neck. More specifically, either the center right below the breech or the commander and gunner area on the left side of the tank if the vehicle is facing you. And yes, I do occasionally bounce off that UFP, which it drives me nuts, dude. As for the turret, I don't believe there's a single dart that can punch through that turret reliably. Now, the Chrysanthemum can, but we're not talking about that missile, all right? So if you're an experienced player, when you face the M1A2s, you're likely not going to try to punch through that base turret when the neck is as exposed as it is. So even if you make the turret and the lower front plate armor values infinitely higher, that neck is going to ruin you the majority of the time. But hey, should Gaijin buff the armor? I'm all for it. And I won't get into spall liners as I'm simply not that well informed for when it comes to said feature, and so I'd rather not get too far into it, though I'm sure it would help significantly if it acts like the T90s or the 2A7s. But let's address that big ass elephant in the room, and that is the players. I don't know what it is with us Americans thinking that the Abrams is some super tank that can survive the Death Star's super laser, and now that Gaijin has brought in the clickbait, which is essentially the M1A1HC, which in itself is nearly on par with the original M1A2. I mean, that thing is as tanky as the existing Abrams minus the ERA. Most of who that I see with the clickbait like to just hold W, run headfirst into the enemy, get smacked by 3BM60 or DM53, only to leave after the first death to go do it again in another game. In my opinion, the clickbait was a mistake. The KVT should have been that high tier premium MBT, but of course with the addition of rank 8, it only made sense to bring in a new rank 7 premium, but come on, is that how you guys really feel? And what better way to do it than by selling us a world famous vehicle, okay, maybe not the exact one, but a series of vehicles that has been battle proven time and time again. And yes, I am referencing the first Gulf War, which does count against those HT-72s. There hasn't been too much since, and I'm not counting the current European conflict, at least not yet. But in truth, I can't just blame the newer players. The American teams, they've been suffering even well before the clickbait came. I think that really has much to do with the advent of the F-14, the F-16, and now the F-15. I mean, Gaijin likes to advertise these in their in the YouTube side of things. Go play the A-10, go play the F-16, when it's like, dude, you have to grind through this damn thing for hundreds of hours before you can get it. But then again, the F-15 is not really well suited for CAS duties, but maybe a video on that a little bit later. So at the end of the day, I believe it's a multitude of factors that causes the American teams to fall apart, from a lack of overall protection on the Abrams, which is justified in my opinion, your guys' frustration that is, to a general skill issue that most, if not all, newer players have. And I can't believe I'm saying that about top tier. It used to be that if you wanted to play up there, you had to grind for hundreds, if not thousands of hours to learn the game properly, which is why I never recommend top tier premiums to those new players. Albeit I do, recommend my 3%, etc. But I will never say you should buy top tier vehicles, just not once. And to add, I don't think a new dart to the existing Abrams would help unless they model the anti-ERA tip. But why would they buff something that was specifically designed to defeat the biggest, if not the most broken feature of Russian tanks in War Thunder? Excuse the sarcasm. And so there you have it. That is what I think about USA Top Tier. And here's the funny part. The background footage you're watching actually took me nearly an hour to get because our games just, whew, I gotta tell you, I think we lost every single game. And what's funny is I have a 21% win rate with the SEP V2. I mean, my KD's not terrible. I do a pretty good job when I play it, but yikes. But at the end of the day, I want to hear it from you. What do you think about USA Top Tier? Is it frustrating? Is it fun to fight against? Is it just another case of, well, Russian bias? I don't know. At some point, someone says Russian bias is involved for whatever reason, okay? And you know what? You might be right. I'm not going to exclude that possibility. But let me know again down in the comment section. And while you're swinging on down there, don't forget to check out the rest of my media stuff, right? My live streams over on Twitch, Patreon, 3%, you know, the whole spiel. And thank you guys very much for the Happy New Year's. And I will see you not only in the next video or even the streams, but most certainly not at USA Top Tier. I'm not kidding. I'm not going to play USA after this. I'll see you next time.